More than ever, it is obvious that President Joe Biden's administration deliberately employs the power of big tech's authoritarian regulations to stifle the dissenting views of regular Americans. How does Biden weaponize big tech? Can big tech companies meddle in politics in the USA? Stay tuned to find out all the important unanswered questions we need answered. Next up, how does the Biden administration weaponize big tech? It is clear that the administration of President Joe Biden aggressively employs the authoritarian practices of big tech to stifle the dissenting views of regular Americans. Whistleblowers and court discoveries over the past 2 weeks have uncovered proof of the Biden administration's deliberate weaponization of big tech. It started in July 2021, when then White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki revealed that the Biden government was working with Facebook to redact misinformation related to COVID-19. Schmidt informed us that more than 45 representatives from various agencies and a large number of White House employees contact social media sites over misinformation. These organizations include the Office of the Surgeon General, the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Election Assistance Commission. Next off, why are America's technology companies so strong? Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and Alphabet are some of the most powerful companies in the world. They exert increasing power over their markets. Klobuchar, chair of the Senate Antitrust Committee, speaks to the Economist Asks podcast about whether America's mega companies should be broken up. But as the scope of technology grows, we've seen a few enterprises dominate in particular fields. Global tech Goliaths now dominate these markets, from social media to e-commerce. These businesses have quickly developed strategies to acquire more as information and data have grown in importance on a global scale. With this, we've seen how some of these tech giants are now being scrutinized due to some of their questionable surveillance practices. These revolve mainly around how they collect and monitor data across their technology products. With these tech behemoths leaving large footprints in the technology space, it begs the question, have these tech giants become too powerful? For instance, Facebook began as a way for Harvard students to communicate with one another and exchange emails and pictures. However, as these businesses grew in size over time, their original purposes also changed. They were now concentrating on various market segments rather than just one area of interest. Next off, why are all of the major technology companies based in the United States? Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft are the world's most valuable MNCs by market capitalization. Their services mediate almost every facet of our lives, almost wherever we are. Hence, they have established offices and facilities across the world. However, their CHQs have always remained in the United States, US. This enables big tech to influence the American government into advancing its interests domestically and internationally. Domestically, big tech shapes government regulations to augment its dominance in the American market. Internationally, it relies upon America's outsized influence to shape international trade agreements and extend its market dominance worldwide. Tech companies have become adept at exploiting the corporate tax loopholes in the US to minimize their liabilities. Between 2018 and 2020, their effective tax rate was only 15.4%, which is substantially below the global average of 25.85%. Another explanation is that big tech companies can minimize their tax obligations by remaining headquartered in the United States. Moreover, big tech firms are most concerned with 3 areas of regulation: antitrust, intellectual property, IP, and privacy. Crucially, they benefit from America's weak regulations across all 3 areas. American domestic regulations are friendly to big tech, making the US the ideal place to base its core activities. Next up, how can we balance the power of tech companies? Facebook, Google, and Amazon didn't exist 25 years ago. They currently rank among the most valuable and recognizable businesses in the entire world. It's a wonderful tale, but it also serves to illustrate the need for the government to dismantle monopolies and foster free markets. Governments around the world are currently debating this issue, but Van Dyke of Utrecht University provides insight, if not a solution, on how to get there. In the Rhineland model, which is a social market political economy, you have the state, you have the market, and you have civic society, she defines. But in the digital space right now, there's only privatized market space. There is no public space and no civil society. She continues by saying that this leaves no room for the expression of public values like privacy, security, and the veracity of available information. But we could still change that. It will require some powerful actors, mostly from the government and civil society. According to Culpepper, there are more issues at stake than just the digital markets that the big companies currently control. They're not just controlling markets now, they're controlling the future. Next off, can big tech companies meddle in politics in the USA? Big tech corporations have evolved from being merely platforms to becoming significant global players with vested financial and political interests. They have gained immense power with time and influence state-level decisions. Examples of how tech companies have expanded their roles as private powers, as well as global gatekeepers of information, include the following: Twitter's decision to silence former U.S. President Donald Trump following the violent violence on Capitol Hill, Facebook's decision to forbid Australian publishers and users from sharing or viewing news content, and YouTube's decision to block anti-vaccine content from spreading misinformation. These situations pose legal questions about who is legitimate, who ought to be in charge, and how democracy should operate in the modern world. This indicates the emergence of digital constitutionalism, a new stage in which individual rights and state powers are relocated among many entities on a worldwide scale, including technological businesses. Next up, how should lawmakers act as Biden weaponizes big tech against Americans? During the past few weeks, whistleblowers and court discovery have unveiled evidence of the Biden administration's intentional weaponization of the power of big tech. The process began in July 2021 when Jen Psaki, who was at the time the White House press secretary, revealed that the Biden administration was coordinating with Facebook to delete misinformation about COVID-19. More than 45 officials at different agencies and multiple White House staffers communicate with social media platforms about misinformation. The Justice Department stonewalls attempts in court to discover contacts between big tech and White House staff. In newly emitted emails, Facebook employees abide by direct orders from government officials on which Facebook accounts to act against. This alarming alliance between the liberal bureaucrats in Washington and Meta has resulted in the silencing of conservative voices. There is no sign of this slowing down. It only seems to be getting worse. Twitter's deplatforming of former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson is part of a larger effort to weaponize big tech against the American people. The whistleblower report revealed the prevalence of corruption inside Twitter, and it's no surprise that Twitter management is willing to take orders from Washington. Next off, how is the Biden regime trying to launch a war against free speech and traditional values? The Biden administration has launched a war against free speech and traditional values. Under the disguise of safeguarding Americans from misinformation, Biden and his Silicon Valley cronies have deployed account restrictions, suspensions, and deplatforming in a continuous totalitarian campaign to suppress critics and protect the crumbling remnants of the ruling class. Big tech isn't depending on algorithms or unbiased third-party fact-checkers to determine which accounts to suppress. Instead, social media companies work with their handlers in Washington to inflict a liberal worldview on America. Misinformation policies were never anything more than an excuse to silence enemies of the ruling class. What Donald Trump called the deep state has now expanded its reach into every facet of our lives. Americans may no longer post their political opinions freely without fear of being deplatformed. The unelected bureaucrats in Washington have conquered Silicon Valley and claimed it as their own. Americans can be certain that this suppression and hostility toward conservatives will only worsen in the wake of Biden's controversial speech on Thursday night, which acted as a declaration of war against more than 70 million MAGA Republicans. Next up, how do big tech troll and bully educationists, politicians, and journalists? Under the pretense of advancing journalism or research, Google, Facebook, and other extremely large tech giants have created a lobbying structure that ties academics together in an intricate web of patronage. It's past time for more openness. According to the New Statesman, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft paid research institutions affiliated with respected universities millions of dollars, purportedly to further science. They catch the educators in this trap. Facebook gives away millions in grants annually, asking researchers to come up with ideas to enhance transparency and fairness and privacy. Crucially, researchers must apply with a proposal. Facebook single-handedly decides whether or not to award the grant, so that academics must guess Facebook's red lines and refrain from crossing them. Big oil and big tobacco could pressure journalists by threatening to cancel advertising budgets. Big tech cannot do so because it does not regularly advertise in the media. A 1992 survey showed that 90% of U.S. editors felt pressure from advertisers because of the journalism they ran. Like journalists, former politicians regularly move on to plush jobs with big tech. Laurent Solly, the former aide to French President Nicolas Sarkozy, is now vice president for Southern Europe at Facebook. Nick Clegg, former deputy prime minister of the United Kingdom, took a job at the firm in 2018. Society needs new approaches to govern big tech because it is powerful in ways we haven't encountered before. If the current situation prevails, the mighty big tech will interfere in state-level decisions. Should lawmakers enforce stricter laws on powerful companies? Is Biden really trying to suppress free speech? Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching.